I'll be addressing the design and site layout questions. Question number one that we received was, can you reduce the public meeting room in option 3 to less than 5,000 square feet? In option number 3, the public meeting room square footage that was assigned was based on the intent of it being more of a conference center that includes large meeting rooms, several smaller conference rooms, and support spaces for that meeting area. We're also thinking that the larger room could be divided up again to be useful for township police and other community organizations. So I'm sure that that square footage could be addressed during the design process and may fluctuate as more is known. Question 2 was, what kind of spaces would be in the renovated admin and quatraini buildings? Well, they would include the township spaces of the township departments, including administration, finance, codes, public works, and we've moved the recreation department into this area. Hard to see that question below. Let's see if I can get the page down. Yep. Are there any existing test borings for the site? We are not aware of any that exist for the area that's under consideration for development at this time. Is there the possibility of reducing the number of parking spaces? The original programs that we presented were derived by using the current zoning code for the township building and the ball fields. For the police department, there was a parking vehicle assessment done as part of that program, and that was the count for their spaces. And as we discussed, the parking count for the skating was reduced from the required 172 spaces to 60 spaces, and that was done through analysis with the township engineer and traffic engineers to see what was really be required. We felt that was a little excessive. So, but the question is, yeah, you could probably reduce them or shared spaces once the formal and final programs are identified. What is the stormwater strategy given to the vast amount of parking areas? Will an underground holding tank be required? The stormwater management would meet existing ordinances, and we anticipate a use of rain gardens and below grade seepage beds would be utilized to handle the stormwater. The stormwater strategy and stormwater cost are part of the costs right now associated with the projects. Pedestrian circulation within the site is not addressed. Current site plans are schematic in nature, and at the design phase, we would identify what the circulation patterns would be, sidewalks and signage and whatnot. Costs for or assumed sidewalks and spaces are included in the cost estimate. Please confirm the library layout for Scheme 6 and how it works. The box in the plan is only 60 by 60, which is 3,600 square feet. Is the intent to have 2 levels at 12,000 square feet each above essentially a 3-story library. The way we have it in Scheme 6 currently under design is that it would be a lower level parking space, a lot, and then on the entry level from the main plaza would be parking plus this core spaces, which would be elevators and stairs, and that would take you upstairs to the 2 stories of the library above. So it actually, from the Manoa side, it would appear to be a 4-story building. From the main parking lot area, it would appear to be a 3-story building. For Scheme 4, be 4-level concept, 2 for police and 2 for library. Again, these are schematic, but right now on our plan, we're assuming that it would be a 4-story building. What is the proposed main entrance for the 2,400 square feet police department in Scheme 3? And does this add floor increase the project cost? Scheme 3 already is formulated on the concept of being 2 stories. The police entrance will be on the lower level, and the public entrance will be on the 1st floor. So there are 2 entrances separated by design, and those costs are already included in the cost estimates. 10, was a preliminary cut fill analysis done? Yes, that was done as part of our cost estimating. Can the recycle center be included in the option number 3? Again, the plans are schematic, but I'm sure that we could work that recycle center into any of the concepts. Where do the underground utilities currently run? The underground utilities currently serve existing buildings on the site and appear to be adequate to serve the intended uses. The extent of these locations would be identified during the design and development process. How much parking is dedicated, restricted to police only in each option? Please label that. We had them labeled on our plans. The parking assessment that we did working with the police department determined that they needed 94 spaces, some for their vehicles and some for their private parking. Final counts and final program for this would be more carefully delineated and understood during the final programming phase during design development. 14, can we reduce the police building program by 5 to 10% or even more? The programs for these departments, the township as well as the police, were determined by meeting with township representatives. These programs identify spatial needs to determine and to provide required services efficiently and safely for the next 20 to 30 years. So we weren't looking for the smallest spaces possible. When the program does move forward and you have final architects, and those programs will be pared down, identified, and whatnot during the design development phase of the projects. Is there a cost advantage to developing the site closer to or avoiding relocation of underground utilities? This again would be addressed during the design development phase. Number 16, what are the effects of expanding the site or the ball fields on the larger program options 2 and 6, both for site planning and cost? Does it make a large-scale option better? And are these costs associated within this too high? In talking to the township, the board indicated that the redevelopment should not include the ball fields, so it should have no impact on the ball fields. We were not to explore additional land acquisition for these options. And lastly, for the design and site layout questions was, can we address stormwater management, its impact on site plan, parking, and the cost adequately represented in the study? For our study, we anticipated that the majority of the stormwater management system would be subsurface, similar to the quarry site. Costs for this stormwater management system are included in the cost estimates.
So it may seem that a lot of the questions we kept saying we'll have more definitive responses for you when we get further along, but remember that these schematics are not going to be able to provide us the level of detail that some of these questions would beg the question of. So, we'll move on to the traffic. Mr. Pannoni did an analysis of traffic and did a presentation. I think we had a few questions about that.
There's about a half a dozen traffic questions, and the first two I'm just cut right to the heart of the traffic issues surrounding the site. So what I was going to do very, very briefly, and only with a couple of exhibits, is actually pull back up a little bit of what I talked about last month. So the first two questions, I'm kind of going to answer them concurrently and flip up to a couple of other exhibits. But the question is, can we elaborate quantitatively and subjectively about the traffic around the site? And are the wait times at the intersections untenable? So I'm going to go back and forth between some slides and attempt to do some of the quantitative stuff. Everybody remembers the site. It's real simple. The site's at Darby and Manoa Road. Manoa Road goes from east to west. Darby Road goes from south to north. And here's the quantitative part. We did counts. We did counts at various existing township facilities, and we also did trip projections so that we could look at the impact of any development in that area on the intersection and the surrounding area road network. So if you look at the table, we quantify between a combination of counts and the industry standards the number of AM peak trips and the number of PM peak trips. One of the things that I thought could be helpful that maybe I didn't quite cover the first time is to give some comps. A PM peak trip, that's one trip. One trip is similar to one single family home. So if for example, you look at the library has 205 PM peak trips, that's the same as saying 205 homes. A few other comps, a I'm sorry, let me get on the intersection first. The intersection, we counted also, again, quantitative. We have an AM peak hour of 2,200 trips, we have a PM peak hour of 2,500 trips, very, very similar in volume to the intersection we have right here at Darby and Eagle. Almost identical, I was surprised. Now, the configurations are a little bit different, but the traffic counts are almost identical. A few other comps on trips. The Wawa that's down there. The Wawa down there probably has about 400 to 500, we haven't counted it in many years, but it has about 400 or 500 peak hour trips in the PM. A Dunkin' Donuts' peak hour is an AM. A Dunkin' Donuts will typically have about 230 peak AM hour trips. The YMCA projected 200 in the morning and 300 in the afternoon. Just to give a little bit idea of what trips are. Pharmacy, typical pharmacy is 130 to 150 peak hours. So you can compare those to the trips that are projected quantitatively here. And again, the intersection itself, we counted, so that's not subjective. And that volume compares very, very similar to the intersection we have right outside the street. We met with PennDOT. We actually evaluated the intersection and looked at the impact on level of service of any proposed development. And we determined, and as the board probably remembers, we determined that to build a township, to add a township building to the site, the left turn lane on Manoa Road would need to be extended. And to add a township building and a library, the left turn lane would also have to be extended, but further. And that's how the levels, that also impacts the level of service. Also, we'd have to extend the left turn lane on Darby Road. Again, this is all quantitative. Now, going back to the original question, with regard to the wait times at the intersection, PennDOT uses what are called level of service to quantify the impact of traffic on an intersection. It's actually something PennDOT uses, something the township uses. It's not something the township invented. It's not something PennDOT invented. It's actually invented by the feds. The feds use quantitative and qualitative components such as wait time, speed, traffic volume, safety, maneuverability, so that everybody can identify on a level playing field a level of service at an intersection and at a turning movement. And that's what we evaluated when we looked at the impact of these developments on the intersection. For the intersection itself, currently it functions as what we call a level service, a C. Level service C is similar to some of our frankly better functioning intersections. When you go to some of our real stressed intersections, the Westchester Pike and Eagle, the Triangle, the level of services aren't anywhere near a C. So the current level of service is a C. If a township building gets added to that intersection, the level of service stays at a C. If a township building and library gets added, it goes to a D, and frankly, just barely. So it's not like we go right through it. The bigger stress, frankly, is on the left turn movement on eastbound Manoa. And that's what we had talked about last meeting, and that's why I showed how the left turn lane has to be extended. The current level of service on eastbound Manoa is a C. You add a township building, it becomes a D. You go so far as to add a library, it becomes an E. And again, to get a little more quantitative, the wait times associated with those impacts. Currently, you have a 30-second wait to make a left turn, peak hour, a left turn from Manoa onto Darby Road. If you add a township building, the wait goes to about 39 seconds. If you add a township building and library, it goes to about 75 seconds. The lengthening goes from existing of 80 to 145 to 235. Quantitatively, again, working with Mike, there were values, dollar values put into the budget for extending those lanes, approximately 125 to extend it to accommodate the township building, about double that to accommodating a township building and library, not the least of which is you got to move utility poles, and that's where a lot of the costs come in. Does access to Manoa Road need to avoid the PennDOT required left turn lane? Good question. And what that's really asking is We have access to Manoa Road, if everybody remembers, at Columbia Drive, down below the recycling center. It's actually not even shown in this aerial. And the answer is yes. You need that access to be outside of any queue on Manoa Road. So the access, the main access on Columbia, which is down in this direction, has to be outside of that queue. Uh-oh.
No.
I really went in the wrong direction. And you can see Columbia Road. See how Columbia Road comes down through the bottom? That access would be below the queue, which extends just past the steps. Everybody remembers where the steps are. Fortunately, I'll probably drop back and forth a few times. Our main entrance improvements and wayfinding considered and priced. The main entrance is the main entrance off of Darby Road. We do not, the main entrance off of Darby Road will be tweaked. It may be upgraded a hair, but it's not a major improvement that's needed. It will remain primarily an ingress and an egress. We anticipate the egress needs will be at least not increased because we're going to do a lot of work to get egress out to Manoa Road. And right now, when you exit the site from the main entrance and you want to go north on Darby Road, which is where a tremendous amount of the movement is, you've got to get all the way over to the third lane and make a U-turn. So we certainly anticipate there'll be more traffic using Columbia Road coming up, getting in the left turn lane and turning left. Wayfinding speaks for itself. To be signage and everything when and if the site's developed. Is an easement required for improvements needed on Columbia Road? Right now, Columbia Road, the records show that it's what we call an unimproved township street. It's actually a driveway. It's a paved surface, but it's unimproved township street. An easement's not required. It shows up on the tax maps, and that's why we consider it an unimproved township street. When and if the job progresses and we decide to use Columbia for sure, we'd have to engage, township would have to engage Jim to confirm that, but all indications now that it's unimproved, and therefore we don't need it's our street, and we don't need an easement to improve it. Why build multiple site roadways off Manoa rather than relocating or combining? Again, a fairly good question. Right now, there's an entrance right by the existing police station, and this access to Manoa Road exists. We would love to have been able to put an entrance and exit in this area in between, but the grades prohibit it. By the time you come up from Manoa Road into the site, you're chasing grades so far back that you lose your sight. So we will maintain this entrance, this egress point as entrance only, and then take advantage of existing Columbia access point to get the access out to Manoa Road. It's logical. We have very good sight distance down on at Columbia where it comes into Manoa. We will no longer permit the egress at the police station entrance. Can the existing Manoa entry be placed further away from Wawa so there's better access to the site? The answer to that's the same, frankly, as number 6. Again, because of grade. And again, frankly, we'd love to be able to move it further away from Wawa. But if you move that drive down into the site, you start having your delta and your grade gets greater and greater. To maintain the type of grades we need on a driveway, you just go further and further into the site, and then you lose the ability to use your site. Again, that's why we go down to Columbia. That is all the traffic questions.
Okay, I'm going to try and get through the general questions pretty quickly. There's each of the people from the team contributed to this, so I'll try and blow through them. First is that the presentation is posted on the website. It's on the home page. There is a banner at the top. If you click the link, you should be able to download the original presentation that was made last month. The next question is, how will the board determine how it will vote on the 6 options? And ultimately, the board's going to make the decision, but again, we suspect if there's a motion and a second for an option, move to the floor, that's how you're going to vote. Please disclose which options would impede on the public fields and which would not. None will impede on the public fields. And All of the improvements were specifically geared toward not encroaching, not only on the field use itself, but on the parking that's occupied by the folks that use the field. For instance, we took care not to try and do things to place a building immediately adjacent to the field where the parking is located. Can you estimate the mill increase? We did get some information from Amy. The mill's increase needed to occur in the next tax cycle for the $300,000 in debt service requirements on the last bond that you issued. And Amy's indicated that it's 1.4% or 0.102 mill increase to generate the $300,000 to meet the debt service. And the estimated increase in operational costs for next year, Amy has indicated that it's fair to assume at least 3 to 5% real estate tax increase would be needed for general operations, which would equate to 0.225 to 0.366 mill increase. So that's the order of magnitude. In the first 10 or so parking spots next to the middle school nearest the current library be designated as library parking. As the board knows, we can put some restrictions in place. We can restrict the amount of time you spend parked there to move cars along and turn the cars over, but you can't designate it for library parking. Will the township take the lead to investigate other parking remedies at the current library? You know, that's the commissioner's determination. Ultimately, because the library is an independent entity that's, you know, they have the right to pursue some parking options as well. Has the township considered the parking design suggested by Gary Bogosian for parking from the alley behind the orthodontist? And the answer is yes, it has merit and warrants further investigation. And in fact, Mr. Pannoni's office has already taken some measurements and looking at the turning radius and what that net gain might be. The next issue is the timeline. If you want to come up and speak to the timeline?
Yeah, sure. That's question number one, the timeline. What will the process and timeline be for developing the RFP and selecting a planning, engineering, design team? I guess it would depend on the vote of the board. The timeline includes soliciting updated RFQs first, then interviewing candidates and soliciting RFPs from those recommended to the board. We anticipate that whole process could take 6 to 8 months. Check the other ones too. Okay. Can you address generally how long it would take to design, approve bid, construct, and finally occupy each option? All three new components of one project. Once the design team is in place, the approximate time frame in discussing it with the team, we considered it to be between 3 to 4 years, depending upon how the programming goes and those selected for the team. And next are the cost and cost matrices.
Mr. Ryan is with IMC Construction, and he was retained to do pre-construction services on the project. Mr. Ryan is here to address the costs and the cost matrix.
Which button am I using to advance?
This one.
All right, there we go. So the first question on the costs and cost matrix, can the matrix be revised to provide an executive summary comparison of all the options shown together, indicating the new and renovated components, the parking, and if they could be listed separately for the police and the other public usage, costs and rounded numbers, and the rounded tax implications. That matrix has been revised and I believe is at the end of the slide. I believe it's the last slide. Next item, provide a line-by-line cost estimate, including the underground fuel tank remediation, phasing costs, property acquisition, lighting, landscape generators, fencing, fuel area, stormwater detention. With the exception of the property acquisition costs, which are not anticipated in the current schemes, all the items and questions were included in the cost analysis and budget. Due to the conceptual nature of the plan, it's premature to do a detailed line-by-line cost estimate. Next two questions are really related, so I'll read them both and then give the answer. How was the cost estimate done, and was it done based on a cost per square foot only, and how was this determined? So the cost estimate was done by IMC Construction. The budget was developed by analyzing similar projects, including a recent 2013 facility constructed in Phoenixville, where IMC was the project management firm. We were intimately involved in the planning, cost estimating, and ultimately bidding and construction of the project. Costs from that project were analyzed and modified to fit the program for our project, with allowances for cost escalation